So the Practical Plus Elite by Hanwei is one of 4 swords from their practical or performance range. This one, the Elite, is geared more towards frequent cutting and advanced drawing and practice. They all play their own different roles, or that's what they're geared towards. Now, Hanwei themselves are set up in Dalian in China. They were first established in 1991 by Mr. Paul Chen. They suffered a fire in 2011, and they saw this as an opportunity to completely remake their facility. And everything is pretty much on site now. They're forging, they're polishing, their fittings, their mouldings, all that is done by them on site. And there's just a site there of some of the forges in use. And they've done well. They're back up to previous production rates now. And all their fittings are cast on site. That's a wax mould that they use for their fittings. And you'll see here the Elite is not quite as wide as the XL and the XL Lite, but it is certainly a sturdy blade. And there's the complete range there, the XL Lite, XL Elite, and Iaito. You'll notice the XL is actually probably the widest out of all that range. But when it comes to the Elite, this blade certainly has a presence. It does feel a little bit front heavy, but it is geared towards cutting. And as you can see here, it doesn't really have a problem with that. As long as you have your edge alignment set, then you can rapidly cut through at least pool noodles here. I do have tatami coming up, but as you can see here, that's very strong Shinogi Zakuri geometry to the blade, and I think the whole range shares that type of geometry. But it makes for a very strong presence in the blade, and a very solid blade too. You can see it's got quite a bit of thickness to it, and it has that visible hamon, and very simple but well fitted koshere right across the sword. You can just see here, I'm just trying to showcase that hamon as it's sort of rippling through there, and you can see that geometric kasaki as well as I'm just sort of moving it around. So all in all, it's not a very bling sword, but it's a very sturdy sword, and it does the job that it's described to do quite well. It strikes me as one of those day-to-day swords. If you had to strap one to your waist, then this would be the workhorse. This would be the one that would be able to take a bit of ruggedness. You'd be able to do the job, take it home, fix it up, do maintenance to it, and you're away again. You also do get a lot of instruction sheets here. That's the product info and katana maintenance sheets. And you also get the saya maintenance, how to fit and shim the koyaguchi and the saya. If we take a look at the suka or scar, we can see that there's a little bit of wandering from the Ito wrap there. It's a bit hard to be as precise with the slightly smaller diameter Ito that they've used on the handles. There are points on this scar that I love, and there's points not so much. But you can see the transitions there are quite well matched. And despite the appearance of the thinner Ito, it actually offers quite a bit of grip and is surprisingly comfortable. I'm able to go through my techniques, and I don't feel like I'm losing contact or struggling to hold on to the blade at all, doing any sort of kata or pattern or cutting whatsoever. So again, it's a sword that sort of contradicts itself a little bit. Everything's where it should be, but there's a few little missing bits here and there. That wrap, like I said, it's a little unconventional, but it offers plenty of grip. The handle is tapered nicely. It's about 4 centimeters wide, and that's from the spine to the blade, or the ha or moon of the diameters. You'll notice there's a bit of discoloring there too in the semigawa. My best guess there is that maybe some oil seeped through when the sword was in storage. But I'm reluctant to remove the handle to investigate any further, because everything is fitting quite nicely, very tight, despite everything I'm pointing out about it. You can see there the Fuji is decorated on one side, and the Seppa is matching up, and the Ito is catching the end of that. One thing I did find is there's 2 different Menukis here, different sizes. They both appear to be in the dragon theme, but there's a 4 centimeter difference between these 2 guys. The 2.5 centimeter one is actually on the ura, or inside of the blade, so when I actually wrap my left hand onto the back of the blade, it actually works. I can hardly feel that Manuki there, and it makes fitting of feeling the back of that handle for your grip and turning the blade actually quite well. So I don't know whether it's intentional. I haven't seen it on any other sort of swords, but it works. Again, casting quality is good, just different, but it works. So here's the other side of the handle there, and you can see the Fuchi's got no engraving or patterning on it, which is fine. That is where your thumb and index finger would come up against the Tsuba there. So again, practicality, and they've managed to catch the Ito on the end of that, so everything matching really nicely there too. The transitions for the Ito are all alternating, but they're not all meeting in the middle of the handle. So as I move up, you might be able to notice that as they crisscross, those little points where they meet are either side of the middle of the handle, and that's a major contributor to why these diamonds are wandering. But apart from that, it's tight, it gives good grip, and it's finished quite well for what it is. You can see there the Kashira with the dogwood motif, quite a nice casting, and again it's not speckled or unfinished in any way. A few little fray marks there where they've cut to finish off the Ito wrap, but the end knot is quite nice and flush, and the casting quality is quite detailed. I actually quite like how they've done that there. The last thing I did notice, and this is hardly perceivable unless you're looking for it, is the Samigawa strips are starting to show there at the end. I think this is something that could have been avoided if the Ito was just a little bit wider. Okay, so the Kashira there, the dogwood motif, and again, casting quality is really nice there, and it fits very well to the handle. Apparently these handles match up to the blade with the serial number, and I believe that on how well it actually fits. And not nice, flush, doesn't dig in. And it really lends to being able to grip this sword, which is over 1 kilo, and having a nice beefy Tsuba, and that brings that point of balance back a little bit, and you can really thrust, turn, and strike with this blade, in spite of that handle. It's a real paradox, because you grab it and it feels good. It feels like you got grip, feels like you can direct the blade exactly where you want. The blade itself is balanced well. As you can see me here thrusting and Ochiburi, that type of thing, and I'm able to move it quite well. It is heavy. You will fatigue over time, or using it for an hour may not be an option. But all in all, it's a different handle, but it works, it's tight, and all the bits that should be working are working. The Tsuba is a solid 8.6 centimeters, and it's one of the oldest styles. This is the Kikugata style. Named a lot of Sunburst, Chrysanthemum, Water Wheel, that type of thing. I have seen many variations of this, some very spindly and thin, but this one has a really nice thickness to it. The spokes in it are nice and wide and deep, and you can see there the seppa on that side is just over that 4 centimeter mark and matches really well. On the other side, this seppa is 4.9, so nearly a full centimetre or so difference there. But once that saya goes on, it matches up really quite well. So there is a bit of a difference between the front and back seppa there, but again, look at that finish. Looks like it's actually part of the Hibaki. And we'll move on to the Hibaki in a minute, but one of my pet peeves is where it doesn't meet the blade. And this does. It's again, you'd expect this from someone who actually makes all their fittings and does all their wrapping on site. And if they couldn't pull it off with that type of thing, then you'd be scratching your head and wondering why. But again, everything is tight, everything works well. It feels like everything is considered. Just that little bit of refinement would not have gone astray. So here's the Hibaki here. It's a Yoko Hibaki design. Now, not as detailed as many of the other designs out there, but I do like that convex contour they've got coming up to meet the blade there. They've gone to a bit of trouble to shape this Hibaki, and you'll notice that it just fits really nicely. There's no gaps. It meets the blade quite well. It's solid against the Tsuba and outer seppa there. It meets the back of the blade with absolutely millimeter perfect sort of depth to it. There's no catching when you draw and sheath this one, and even there where sometimes the blade is a bit skew on the other side, that is perfectly matched. And that little convex curve just gives a little detail that you can appreciate. And as you can see there, it matches up. The transition from there, 4.8, I think that is the size of the saya, has plenty of meat on the bones. It does look a bit odd against the Suva, but you'd want a little bit of meat and depth to the saya if you're wielding something like this. And as you can see there, it's finished well. I'm not sure whether that is horn or reinforced plastic on the Koyaguchi, and you can see there on the Korakata there's this sort of swirling molded sort of finish in it. I thought it was damaged when I first saw it, but it's not. It's just the finish of it. The Seigo is nice. It's soft. There's no problem handling it. It doesn't catch or bend or bind, and they've actually gone to the trouble to tying off the end bits of that Seigyo, so there's no extra fraying. You can see there on the Kajiri, again reinforced, and the whole saya is considered, it's got a Kurashimi or stonewash finish. It's a flat, nice, smooth finish, and the taper to the saya is quite nice as well, which makes drawing and sheathing quite a pleasure for something this side. You do have to be very careful of your alignment. You've got to make sure that you're turning the saya onto the tip, and that the back of that blade is running along the back of that saya. There is a chance of digging in if you don't. Retention, big issue on these, so I've heard and read. None at all. So if I just put the sword on the desk, doesn't even hold the weight. So maintenance will be required, especially with something like this. These come sharp. A little bit of downward motion falls straight out. So maintenance is required if you want to operate this thing regularly, safely. Especially when you're drawing, you're going to be wearing a little bit of the saya out, so it's important to have that nice fitment into the Koyaguchi. But plenty of room to draw and sheath. As you can see here, I'm going through the motions. No real problem. Once you get used to how to move that sword in and out of the saya. Now the blade itself is 3.4 centimeters at the Hibaki, and it is a 1566 spring steel with an etched hamon. Now it is differentially hardened, but spring steel usually doesn't show the temper line quite well, so I'm not sure whether this is something they've done for uniformity or just to showcase what is already there. But it's done quite well. It's a Shogo Zakuri geometry on the blade, high polish finish along the back of the blade, and it's worth noting that it's a 6mm moon or back or spine near the Hibaki, with a taper down to 4mm at the Kisaki there, and you can see that geometrical Kisaki and how the different polishes are really highlighting the hamon in that blade. I have sharpened this a couple of times. You can see just there's some ridging, some hammer marks, which can happen. Can't be easy hammering out a lot of these, but apart from that, that's the only thing I've really sort of noticed about the blade. It cuts well, it holds an edge well. The blade itself is 1.24 kilograms, and in the say it is 1.53 kilograms. It has a HRC hardness rating of 60 for the edge and 40 for the spine, and a point of balance of 13.5 from the Suba. And the polish that's used here on the Kisaki and the way that hamon is etched in looks actually quite nice. I think if you keep sharpening, polishing, that may fade over time, and a bit of the actual temper line may show through there. But all in all, this is a very nice blade. It has a sori of 2 centimeters, and it is 71.3 centimeters in the gas, or the length of the blade there. So it's not a lot of detail to the metal itself. It's a spring steel. It doesn't really show grain pattern. It's not a folded blade, but what is there is done really well. And as you can see, it's not a bad looking blade. And that's what you buy these for. This is the business end. This is what it's all about. So it's one of these katanas where everything that is needed is there. It's different, but it works. Once you get used to swinging the blade, it's actually quite nice to use. You really do know that you've got a shinken hanging off your hands, and it really makes you concentrate on form. You can see here I'm getting a little bit sort of off script with my movements and just seeing, how comfortable is it to move it? How dynamic is it? Where's that point of balance? And I had fun with it. It was really quite nice to sling around, to draw sheath and try some unusual movements in it. And it seemed to work really well. I had to work sometimes to actually pull it up and keep good form. But, this is not something that you would probably use in practice, but for short lengths of time, just to sort of get that feel. Now, on with the cutting, again, no problem here. These are they're quite a good quality pool noodle. But again, once you get your angles, once you get your form right, that edge alignment is very, very important on this, I feel. So taking your time to pause, line cuts up, to execute them properly is probably worth your while. You can do a mad slash, but try and keep form in mind whenever you're using this stuff. You are messing around with something that's 70 odd centimeters and razor sharp, so one slip and it's going to end all the fun. So just make sure that, if you're going to do this with safety in mind. If you're a practitioner, same goes. Have fun. You can test your pace, test your speed, test your form, but just bear in mind that familiarity sometimes can breed contempt, and that's something that you always have to keep in mind when you're swinging this stuff around. So while it's fun, be safe, and this is one of these swords that it has a presence that you're not going to forget that you've got a Shinken. So as you can see here, no problem at all through the different pool noodles. This was quite a hot day, actually. It was close to 30 degrees. So the Temeshigiri, in all fairness, this is probably the worst mat I've ever prepared. It was a bit too soft and soaked too long. I think it was like 10 minutes out, but again, blade had no trouble. Second cut wasn't aligned properly, and then on the cuts coming up, I just went for it. It bent there, and I still managed to cut through, and again, cut through, no problems at all. So despite my half-assed attempt at soaking a mat, I can usually do it quite well. The sword forgave me, and it performed quite well. So pricing on this, first of all, I will say shop around is your best bet, both online and domestically. The best prices I found here in Australia range between $850 and $900, and online, this is in US dollars. eBay $350 to $500. Cult of Athena had for $289, so $290 US dollars. And of course, you've got to put shipping on top of that if you're buying from overseas, and that is usually in the range of $100, sometimes more. The benefit of buying domestically, if there is a problem with the product, you can usually send it back to the retailer and they can sort that for you. But the conversion rate is what gets us here, guys, in Australia. So while the rest of the world looks at a $500 sword, by the time we convert over into Australian dollars, we're looking somewhere around the $700, $800, $900 for this. So it sort of throws it into a different light for us. For instance, at the current exchange rate, if you say buy a $500 sword, with the conversion rate, you're looking at 791 Australian dollars just for the conversion. So, it's one of those things, the tyranny of distance, we often got to pay a little bit more, but is it worth it? Look, if you're a practitioner looking for something that is going to do the job when you're cutting, that feels like a real Shinken, something that's going to take a bit of a battering around, maybe if this is your first cutting sword, then I recommend it. This sword sort of lends itself to being able to be taken apart and worked on. And if you're going to use it as a tool, I think that's an integral part of learning how to use a katana, is the maintenance and everything else you've got to go around that. If you just want a backyard cutter, then I think this also is robust enough to get the job done. The differential hardened spring steel does hold an edge a little better. Again, doesn't take solid impact, but it will do the job in heavy to medium cutting, no problem at all. You will just have to sharpen it, I would say, a lot more, but it does hold an edge quite well. So all in all, I do like this. It is not a top of the range sword, but sometimes I think we get a bit precious. If we buy something that's really, really expensive, we get a bit afraid to use it. But this one, I think you'd be more willing to just go out and use, and it's sort of that's what it's made for. That's what it lends itself to. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the review, and happy cutting, and stay tuned. There's another one coming up soon. Bye for now.